iron in their soul. What's up? This is Iron and Soul, back with another video. Today's video is entitled Trouble in the Hip Hop World. As I begin this video, I want to say rest in peace to rapper Trouble, who was murdered in cold blood on June 5th. Condolences to his family and loved ones who were left behind. And it's unfortunately just another example of that deaf spirit that seems to be so active in the hip hop world. We go back to the 90s with Tupac Shakur and Biggie Smalls. We can fast forward to recently, the last year or two, with so many rappers. King Von down in Atlanta. We could talk about FBG Duck in Chicago. We could talk about MO3 down in Texas. We could talk about Slim 400 over on the West Coast. And the list can go on and on. All those who have lost their lives, as well as those who are currently facing trials and court cases and whatnot. We think about all those who are fighting cases, such as Lil Durk in the case he has to fight. We think about what's happening right now with Gunner and Young Thug down in the South as well, and Casanova 2 times over in New York City. So as I think about the trouble in the hip hop world, it is of course a play on words from the rapper Trouble, who just recently passed on June 5th. And I use that not lightly because his life kind of is like a reflection of what has happened to so many other rap artists. So I hope that this message will be a word of wisdom for those of you who are rappers, and those of you who aspire to be rappers, those of you who may look up to those who are gifted with this area of talent and art. I want to read something from Jay-Z's book, Decoded, that gives a lot of insight into what is happening right now in the hip hop world, as well as what has happened in the past. There was a very famous artist named Basquiat who has a lot of paintings. And he had one painting in particular that essentially gives insight into what happens so often to young kings. Key word here is young kings. I'm going to read from his book, Decoded. He says, Basquiat's work often deals with fame and success. The story of what happens when you actually get the things that you died for. One print I owned is called Charles I. It's about Charles Parker, the jazz pioneer who died young of heroin overdose, like Basquiat. In the corner of the painting are the words, "Most young kings get their head cut off." Like a lot of art, Basquiat created this line has layers of meaning. The head could mean the literal head on your shoulders, or it could be referring to your other head to castration. I read it as a statement about what happens when you achieve a certain position. You become a target. People want to take your head, your crown, your title. They want to emasculate you, make you compromise or sacrifice in a way that no man or woman should. And you resist it until one day your albums aren't moving, and the shows aren't filling up, and it seems like the game might have moved on without you. Then you start to change. You do whatever you need to do to get back into that spotlight. And that's when you're walking dead. One way or another, they get you. The cliche is, be careful what you wish for, because you might get it. Nearly every rapper who's made it big, or has even been modestly successful, has had to deal with getting one of his heads chopped. Rappers like Pun, Big L, Old Dirty Bastard, Pimp C, among many, many others, have literally lost their lives just when they were about to peak. Rappers at the top of their game have been locked up, sometimes for long bids. The stories you hear can really make it seem like success can be a curse. Rappers who've been dangled over balconies for their publishing money, driven out of their hometowns, messed up by drugs, sued by their own families, betrayed by their best friends, sold out by their crews. There are rappers who blow up and blow through whole fortunes, squander every opportunity, and before you know it, end up back on the block. The crazy thing is, we don't even question it anymore. We take it for granted. I remember when Hammer was the biggest star in the world in the 80s. There were a lot of people who clowned him because of the big pants and dancing, like he was the rapper from Disney World. But Hammer was from East Oakland. Even when he was spinning around with his pants billowing all around him, you can see in his eyes that he was still a nigga from the hood. So when he was in Forbes magazine with 8 figures after his name, big pants and all, I was impressed. It was a huge moment for hip hop. For a black rapper to make that kind of transition to mainstream and to get the kind of money was unprecedented. A few years later, Hammer was filing for bankruptcy. Today, when you see stars rise and fall like that, you just think, yep, he effed up. But with Hammer, it was the first time we've seen that kind of fast movement from the bottom to the top and back again. It's no diss to Hammer to say that it was shocking to watch it happen. I'm sure he was as shocked as anyone. And of course, 2 of the greatest rappers to ever do it were both murdered in their prime. The not so funny stuff is that Pac and Biggie were perfectly safe before they started rapping. They weren't being haunted by killers until they got to music. Biggie was on the streets before he started releasing music. But he never had squared of scooters or the feds coming after him until he was famous. And Pac wasn't even heavy in the streets. It wasn't until he was a rapper that he started to get shot at, locked up, and stalked by the cops, and eventually murdered. I was reminded of this when I recorded Moment of Clarity with Eminem for the Black Album. It was 2003, and he was at the top of the music world. 3 major multi-platinum albums, 20 million sold, a #1 film with 8 Mile, and on and on. He was probably the biggest star in the world. When we met at the studio, I reached over to give him a pound, and when we bumped, I could feel that he had on a bulletproof vest. Here was Eminem, someone who was doing the thing he loved and succeeded at it, probably beyond his wildest dreams. And he had to wear a bulletproof vest to the studio. He should have been on a boat somewhere enjoying himself without a care in the world, not worrying about getting shot up on his way to work. It's easy to take shots at performers when they seem to self-destruct. But there's another way to look at it. When you reach the top level, there's suddenly so much to deal with on all fronts. You have old friends and distant family who suddenly come close. People who feel like they should be getting rich from your success. You have a target on your back from other people, rappers, hustlers, angry cops, who feel like your success should be theirs. You have to deal with lawyers and accountants. You have to be able to trust these people you're just meeting with everything you have. They're just more of everything. Women, money, friends, powers of whatever your vice is. There's enough of whatever you love to kill you. That kind of sudden change can destabilize even the most grounded personality. And that's when you lose yourself, like Eminem's song says, superstardom's close to postmortem. I think that's a great insight into the whole rap game from Jay-Z in his book, Decoded. Perfectly written. These men who are relatively unknown, in many cases poor, come from poor communities, many of which are African American, with a few white men who come from disenfranchised families as well, such as Eminem. And now I'm gonna give my opinion on why they receive so much heat. As Chuck D said once, hip hop artists or rappers are like the ghetto CNN. In other words, you now have a perspective on what's happening in Black America that is a different narrative than what you hear on Fox News. It's a different narrative than what you hear on CNN. It's different from any politically correct statement that you would hear online, on the news, on television. You now have these loud sounding beats and these young men who are in many cases frustrated. I think about one of Lil Wayne's songs from early 2000s. What did he say? I'm young, wild, crazy, and disgusted, not terrified of nothing. I think about FBG Duck. He talks about his depression. No one knows how I feel, so I pop 4 or 5 pills. I think about Nas from back in the 90s. It's not hard to tell. So I excel and prevail. The mic's my contract, I'm clientele. So you have all of these guys who are giving their raw, heartfelt emotion over a beat. And it's loud, it's aggressive, it's in your face. And now these men who are easy to ignore, you are now forced to deal with them because quite frankly, your white kids might like them. You see them on television. They're now at these events. They are now rich and they now may live in the same community you live in. And so now we have to deal with these guys. And what happens with many of them, they end up some cases, losing their lives because of jealousy. Those who come from where they come from, who will never reach that level of success. And so it's so unfortunate that many of them, as Master P has suggested, had to leave their hometown. In fact, that was the exact advice that Master P gave his artists. And unfortunately, it didn't work out too well for C Murder, his brother, who's in jail now for a murder case, as well as Shine back in the 2000s. He had a case over in New York. Mac, who was just recently released from prison after being in prison for, I think, over 20 years. NBA Youngboy, case down in the South in his hometown. The real G Money was murdered in cold blood in his own hometown. We can keep going on and on. FBG Duck, murdered in Chicago. We think about Nipsey Hussle, murdered over in California where he did so much good. Started businesses, entrepreneurship, inspired people, gave people opportunities to make wealth and to work legally and to give that type of game and wisdom to so many people. Murdered in cold blood. And so many others who are in prison, not knowing when they'll get out. Young Doug, Gunner, casting over times two. Dirk had a case he had to fight for a while. King Von, many years in jail as well. And the list can go on and on and on. If that cycle, as Lil Bibby pointed out in one of his first mixtapes, Dead or Prison, what seems to be the vicious end, not for so many rappers, not just rappers, but a lot of young black men in America. So I think that the trouble in the hip hop game should serve as a warning for those who have a desire to one day become a rapper, or those who are currently underground, grinding, trying to get recognized. I want you to understand, in particular, that once you achieve a level of success, clout, whatever word you want to use, what comes with that are money-hungry women. People who will take advantage of you if they think you don't know how to legally take care of your business. People who will screw you over. People who will be jealous and try to kill you. And then you have your own vices. Whether you have addiction to drugs, alcohol, whatever your demons are, they will be there in abundance. So this isn't to say that you should not pursue your rap career, because rappers have a very powerful position in our current culture. So I want to challenge you, if you do have the gift, use your platform wisely. A lot of eyes are on you. A lot of people are listening to you. You may inspire someone to go to college. You may inspire someone to get through their depression. Rest in peace to Triple Tenacion. His music inspired a lot of people from his generation to deal with their depression, with their hurt. And his death left many saddened. So many people, in fact, most people, when we're going through hard times, when we're going through struggles, we try to find a song, something to give courage, strength, inspiration. I would even say guidance, a little motivation for the day. So while there is a lot of trouble in the hip hop world, I think those of you who can do this, men and women, continue to rap, keep dropping, give people something besides the politically correct answer that is often on television, but may not be given the other side of the story. Be who rapper Chuck D says hip hop artists truly are. And that is the ghetto CNN. This is your brother Iron the Soul. I trust this is a message of power, inspiration, guidance, and I trust that all of us can become strong as iron when the iron comes into your soul as well as mine.